is an ocean in a storm. You may wonder who I am and why I say this. Sit down, and I will tell you a tale like none that you have ever heard.
The Prince of Persia was really born as a 40-pixel high silhouette. You know, he was running and jumping and dodging traps before I knew what his name was or what his story was.
In the Montreal studio, with the core team and I, we began to work on a very first mock-up of what we thought the game could be. And when actually Jordan was here, and when he was watching what we had, the whole team, 7 core members and I, were watching himself watching the mock-up, and he was so flabbergasted.
I saw the enthusiasm and excitement and the new ideas that they had. I was convinced that they were really going to do something good, and I also knew that this was a project that I wanted to be a part of.
It's the story of a prince who tried to save the day after having himself brought chaos into a huge palace. His elf is in adventure by a young, mysterious princess and a magical dagger, but a villain vizier is after them.
Most people remember 2 points about the original Prince of Persia games: the prince as a human character and the fight game. So we started the game based on that.
We implemented dynamic loading in the game to enhance immersion for the player, to provide seamless transition between all the locations in the game, so the player really feels in the palace when he plays.
We exaggerated the proportions of the tower on the rooms to create a more immersive and spooky universe. The prince can interact with almost everything, so we had to justify the level design artistically.
We come up with something new, very sensuous, very immersive for the player. Not too dark, not too cartoony either. Something that feels realistic, but still is, I think the word is plausible.
This type of level design and interactions with the environment allowed us to implement cinematography techniques with the camera. We have the free camera, fight camera, first-person view, and the alternate camera.
The Sands of Time is the main evil entity in the game that transforms the human into sand creature. For this creature, we wanted to have an organic and evil feeling mixing whispery voices and avoid Living Dead type sounds. We worked with Dane Tracks, who created most of our sound effects. All the rest was done here in Montreal. The music style had to fit the Persian look without being Persian music. We selected a mix between rock and Middle Eastern rhythm and melody with an Indian flair. We worked with composer Stuart Chatwood, who is also part of the band Tea Party. He used different instruments like an Indian tabla ensemble, some vocalists, and some string to create the diverse music we can find in the game.
The sand, why does it glow? I can tell you. Inside the hourglass is a marvel that no living man has seen.
We played a lot around with the idea of Persian ninja, acrobatic stuff. Basically, we came up with a character granted with a full range of movesets.
In animating, we use different principles, but the 2 most important were like strong posing to vehiculate like clearly what the character is doing, and also follow through, which is the way the animation ends and the way we stagger the end of the movement through the different part of the body. First, we start off by working the design of character on doing a paper sketch. Once we got a good design, we move on to 3D creating the skeleton. On top of that, we layer the polygon mesh and texture. And once we got a satisfying result, we let it age to see if it passed the test of time.
The Prince has more than 750 animations. He doesn't have 750 moves, but here we're talking about all this little transitions animation that makes the Prince switching from a behavior to another very smoothly. Basically, he has the biggest range of moveset in any action-adventure 3D game.
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction. But I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you, they are wrong.
My name is Yanis Mala, and I'm the producer on Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, as this new franchise being reborn in Ubisoft Entertainment, Ubisoft Montreal. It is the action-adventure genre being reinvented. Working with Jordan was really helpful on that. He's kind of the godfather of that genre. He kind of created himself 14 years ago with Prince of Persia 1 and 2. But in the meantime, it's also a continuum, as you said, from what it was. But here we're talking about Prince of Persia 1 and Prince of Persia 2.
We tried to recapture the spirit of Prince of Persia 1, but in a very free way. That is, we really reinvented the prince and his movements and the rules of the game. So it's not a straight adaptation of Prince of Persia 1. It's a new game. Well, one of the great things about revisiting Prince of Persia is that it's such a rich motherlode of stories and tales. You know, going back and rereading The 1001 Nights, the Shahnameh, or Persian Book of Kings, and all kinds of great imaginative tales that have been with us for centuries. It's fun to read on its own, and it's incredibly inspiring to the imagination to try to come up with a new story set in that world. And the whole team. Yanis asked the whole team to read The 1001 Nights at a very early stage in the project, and the artists and everybody had books of Persian illustrations and architecture, medieval costumes, and all of this stuff was just hugely inspirational. And so, in the early months when we were trying to really focus on what the gameplay was going to be, what elements we were going to use. At the same time, we were deciding what the story elements were going to be. And so to develop these two things together, I think is one of the things that's been so rewarding about this project.
It's a continuum because we took the essence of what was Pop 1 and Pop 2, and we kept those three successful factors that we identified, and we built from scratch around those three things. So yes, it's a continuum from what was Pop 1 and Pop 2. So in that sense, Sands of Time is really faithful to the license. But in the meantime, the way all the mechanics in 3D are built, it's kind of reinventing the genre in terms of gameplay, in terms of storytelling, in terms of special effects.
I started the first Prince of Persia game back in 1986 on the Apple II computer. Really, the inspiration for the first Prince of Persia game was the first 10 minutes of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The scene where Indiana Jones is being chased by a boulder, and everything's collapsing around him, and he's running and jumping, and he misses the edge. He grabs on, he pulls himself up. Well, just those 10 minutes of action-adventure movie made me think, wow, if you could do a video game with that kind of excitement. And that's what I was trying to do with the first Prince of Persia, which, of course, was a 2D side-scroller, and not even a scroller. It was a 2D game which didn't scroll. And my focus was really to try to bring the little character to life by having his movements be more human and more lifelike than than your average stick figure, so that when the character would run and fall, you really felt that he had weight, and when he landed on the spikes, you really felt that it would hurt. And to make the controller and the player connected in a way that when you felt that you were really up there on the screen doing those things, and when the player missed and grabbed onto the edge, you felt that you just had a narrow escape yourself.
As any team, it's growing all through the project from A to Z. A being the preconception start. And this was actually in June, July 2001, when Ubisoft actually got the rights for the license. The headquarters decided to give it to its best studio, Montreal studio. So we got the license. I got the title, and started to gather the team. And at that time, for the preconception stuff, we were actually 4 to 5 people: 1 animator, 1 engineer, 1 game designer, and Jordan here and there. But the actual start and the real start for the core team was to bring Jordan, to invite him here in Montreal to show him what we had at that time. It was a very early mock-up, but the essence was there. It was dozens of AVI showing a bone character doing crazy acrobatic stuff very fluidly, very smoothly, all in 3D. And we were the core team watching to Jordan, and when we saw his reaction, he was flabbergasted. We were like, okay, we got something. This is the real start for us. That boosted the team, and then we spent the whole summer trying to figure out what's going to be the technology, what's going to be the art direction, the main gameplay around those things, starting to study Prince of Persia 1 and 2 to get those 3 successful factors I told you about, and to start the pre-production. Talking from the real core, Alex and Richard, who to me were the very first, very important duo, because they were taking care of the prince. Basically, Alex was the one who was making all his astonishing animations, and Richard was the AI guy who was giving all these animations a life in the engine. Then Claude, the lead engineer, has worked on Donald plus another Disney game that has never been released, and Playmobil Blue also. Who else? That was the real core team. Patrice has worked, the creative director, has worked on Playmobil Blue, Donald. That's pretty much it. David Chadonoff, the lead level designer, he's worked on Donald. He's worked on Blackthorn, the mission pack for Rainbow Six. So there are people, with a minimum 3 to up to 5 years of experience, not including Prince of Persia. The platforms in any project are a producer decision. With such a game, with such an initial design we had in mind, it was clear to me that, plus the strategic objectives we had with the game, like making the license, reborn again, plus giving it to the mass market, it was kind of clear that we had to target on PS2. But in the meantime, we're just talking about main data. Once you have the main data, at a certain point of the project, you can say, okay, here we're going to split, and we're going to have the Xbox team, the PC team, and the GameCube team from the same main core data, adding whatever needs to be added for those platforms. But the initial platform objective was the PlayStation 2, and everything has been designed in the production process to take the most of the platform. Talking about textures, talking about tools, and all the stuff, special effects. At one point, it's always easier to increase data to get the game made on more powerful platforms than to downgrade. On the GameCube side, we come up with a very interesting process. Rather than bringing 10, 15 people a few months before the game ships to make the port and you know, get all the specifics that the platform needs. We came up with one guy only, but from the very beginning. One 3D programmer, extremely talented, who was there to make the GameCube versions happening right from the start, even from the very first prototype that was running on PS2. First, it's interesting so that he could actually see how all the special effects are made, and he has the time to, you know, port them, optimize them, make them specific for the GameCube. It's kind of cost effective. But as far as the specific content is concerned, we're gonna have on the GameCube version content that unlocks things on the GBA, because we're gonna be there's gonna be a connectivity between the two. Xbox, that deserved a whole team by itself, because I told you that we've designed the production process to be optimized for the PlayStation 2. So for example, talking about textures, we wanted them to be dual, not pixel but pixel, but on 128 by 128, because this is the format that fit for the PS2. And then the artist could actually take the most of the texture on that format. Then on the Xbox, you have to take them all and to redo them, okay? Rather than making them at the beginning in 512, and then downgrade them for the PS2. It's a good, effective thing, but downgrading, you know, for PS2, you know. So that's the thing. So it deserved the whole team for the Xbox. So first, of course, all the texture will be high-res. We're gonna have Dolby 5.1, we're gonna have progressive scan support for HDTV. We're gonna have Xbox Live content and Xbox Live features. And we're gonna have high-res environments plus high-res characters for all the characters.
Yeah, I think we all feel a lot of pressure on this project, and I think we put it on ourselves too, because, you know, our hopes were very high from the beginning, and everybody on the team wanted to make this game great. And so that when you're doing that with finite time and finite resources, of course the pressure is always there. But I think we all enjoy it. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it to ourselves.
I'm Raphael Lacoste. I'm the art director of Prince of Persia 4. And I work on this project since April 2002. And we did a lot of work in a very short time to define all the pre-production, graphics. I worked with a very talented location designer, Kai Nguyen, and other artists, very talented artists. We tried to get rid of the cliché of Arabian art, Arabian nights we see in a lot of games, video games. We tried to be more subtle, to go in more monochromatic vision of Arabian art and architecture also. So instead of using the cliché of the gold peanut domes and very complex mosaic, very complex tiles, we try to get more influence in the 19th century painters like Jean-Léon Gérôme or David Roberts, very, very talented artists, Orientalist painters, and also a lot of documentation on history books, history of art and architecture books. So we get a lot of realistic references, but we try to exaggerate the proportions of the architecture to be between reality and fancy. We didn't want to be too cartoony, but we also didn't want to be too realistic. So it's more a position in between, and I think that's the interest of the game, because it's very detailed and between fancy and reality. So we have huge towers. For example, we have the Tower of Dawn is 500 meters high. It's crazy, but it's also, you can recognize parts of the real world, so you have a nice immersion because you feel you are in a plausible world. It's half fancy and realistic. We didn't follow the pop 3D We prefer to stay more close to the number 2, pop 2, pop 1. In the texture, you can recognize more of this feeling with the brown tones, nice Arabian art, Arabian tiles, but not the pop 3D. It was not a reference for us. You can have a beautiful environment, but if nothing is moving, you don't have life. So you don't have a nice immersion in this environment. So we added a lot of subtle details, curtains in the wind, falling leaves, sand, everything, very subtle touches to give life to the environment. That's very important. For example, in the royal chambers, you go into a huge room, broken room, after the storm, sandstorm, and you have nice mist moving on the ground. You have the curtains moving in front of the windows. We also use the same glow as Splinter Cell, so it's a local glow, it's on the object, so we can have nice silhouette of the objects passing through the light. You have the burnt edges, for example. Everything adds life like that. For example, in the palace, we worked on the fabrics. We animated a lot of fabrics. When we are in the zoo area, it's more the trees, the leaves are moving, and the mist also is moving. For the underground part, it's more like the water drop, okay? Mist, moving mist, fog also, animated fog. When we start working on the graphics on a scene, we have a very rough 3D environment done by the level designers. So it's functional, but we have to justify everything. So you have, for example, a pole, and you have a column attached to the ceiling, then you have a beam. What you can do that. So imagine an actor with that. We try to justify the pole, for example, with flags, drums attached to the ceiling were justified in a wood. For example, wall pillar with a structure of the ceiling. And after the beam could be top of an arch, for example, and everything like that. It was a very, very, very good change. And the graphic team did a great job, particularly the singers like Michaela, Céline Tellier, Sébastien Primo, Patrick Lim, a lot of guys. Very good, very good. We tried to keep the proportions in the background as the pictures. And it was important to have dates in the Elysee, also the scale of the prince. So we tried to, we had a lot of polygons. We had about 4,000 polygons in the scene. And it works. So, yes, the programmers did a great job. The engine, it's we can amazing stuff with the engine now. We tried to have contrast. It was contrast in the lighting, in the pictures, also the proportions. So you can suffocate in a small corridor after field value because you're on the top of a floor and you have a huge environment in front of you. You can have the view of the desert in front of the Palace Azad, for example. You have view on the top of the cage. You have small corridors in the underground, huge guest rooms in royal chambers. It's a lot of contrast in the proportions, in the lighting also, to feel different moods. Also we use fog. It's not only a depth feeling, it's give a paint-like touch to the really. It's a kind of desaturation of the picture, but in a color. So we have 3 colors for background, 3 in colors, and the mist take the color of the main lighting of the place. So it's like diffusion light in the mist. Everything works there. We don't overlap in the background, under the background, with the right place of the characters. We can grab the attention on characters. We have nice mood. We tried to be subtle, to low saturated colors, to keep attention, the action, and what you are doing, and have a nice immersion also.
I'm Jordan Mechner. I'm the writer and game designer on Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Farah is an Indian princess, the daughter of a Maharaja whose palace is attacked and conquered by the Prince of Persia and his father's army. So she is captured and taken back to Persia as a slave girl, along with treasures looted from her father's palace. So Farah has a lot of reasons to hate the prince, because in fact, in some way, he is responsible for the destruction of her world. And Farah is the only other person besides the prince to survive the cataclysm when the sands of time are unleashed from their hourglass. And Farah survives because she wears a medallion that, like the prince's dagger and like the staff carried by the evil vizier, protects them from the sands of time. So they're the only three people who are not transformed into sand creatures by the sands of time. At its heart, Prince of Persia is a one-player action-adventure game. And our most important objective was to create the most perfectly controllable, fluidly animated Prince of Persia for the player to control. So for that reason, we didn't develop other playable characters, things like that. You know, you're always playing the prince. But at the same time, we wanted to add humanity to the prince and to the world by not having the prince always playing alone through these empty environments. We felt that that could get just unbearably lonely in the course of 20 hours of gameplay. And of course, an Arabian Nights action-adventure story has to be a love story. You can't have a Prince of Persia game with no princess. And yet, at the same time, we wanted to go beyond the storyline of Prince of Persia 1, where the princess is simply an objective waiting at the end of the game. So our solution was to create the character of Farah, who is a classic Arabian Nights character. She's an exotic Indian princess who starts out hating the prince as her enemy and ends up becoming his ally and gradually falling in love with him. And they have this kind of bickering relationship where they're both attracted to each other, but they're both too proud to admit it. And that develops in the course of the story as they face these terrible dangers and are forced to work together to survive. Another way to look at the character of Farah is that she's really in some sense, the progenitor of Farah is not the princess in Prince of Persia 1, but the mouse, the little white mouse where the prince gets himself stuck at a certain point. He reaches a gate that he's got no way to open. He thinks he's played the level correctly, and just as he's about to give up, the white mouse comes through the bars of the gate, steps on the pressure plate, and allows him to continue. So Farah has different abilities from the prince. She has a bow and arrow. She's good at archery. She doesn't sword fight. She can't run on walls and do a lot of the acrobatic things that the prince can do, but she's also quite agile in her own right. And because she's more slender than the prince, she can actually fit through narrow cracks that he can't fit through. So in that sense, the two of them, with these complementary abilities, are able to get through levels that the prince would not have been able to get through by himself. The prince evolves in the course of the story from an innocent prince to a stripped-down action hero. And the relationship between Farah and the prince evolves as well. They start out pretty cool to each other. And this is reflected in Farah's AI, as even when she follows the prince, she stands a good distance away. And in their weight animations, their body language reflects this certain a mutual interest but coolness between them. As they go through more adventures together and they share these dangers, they become closer. And this is developed through dialogue and through the cinematic scenes that advance the story, but also it's expressed in the gameplay. In Farah's AI, she reacts to the things the prince does, and as the game progresses, we see that Farah and the prince develop their rapport becomes closer. And by the end of the game, Farah and the prince are really playing together, cooperating in sync, two people who really trust each other and have come to care for each other. Yeah. Well, one of the things that excited me so much about the first animation test that Ubisoft did 2 years ago was that it provided a glimpse of how the kind of fluid series of movements that you could do in a 2D game like Prince of Persia 1 could be possible in 3D. And I think it hadn't been done yet because most 3D action-adventure games, you do a move, and then you do another move, and you really have to think in terms of separate animations, and whether they're motion captured or hand animated. Often you end up with animations that look really good independently, but they don't flow together in the same way that that 2D Prince of Persia 1 did.
Yeah.
And
we wanted to transpose that fluidity of 2D in a 3D environment. That's why pretty soon in the project we implemented the walls as a ingredient of gameplay. So really wanted to go from the side scrolling, where you can basically interact with everything, and put that on a 3D scale, and everything is a place to play. And also it's something we said to the team pretty earlier. It's early in the development is, if you can see it, you can play with it. That was really a motto we give to everybody, and in fact it does show in the game. I mean, everything is interactive, and not only you don't pick up stuff, but you use your abilities, your action as a character, and you can use that everywhere.
Yeah, the prince is not a guy who can pick up an object and examine it and put it in his pocket. That's not part of the gameplay. But he is a guy who can jump off of a balcony and grab onto a flagpole, swing around it, and then run and grab onto a ledge on the opposite side. So we built a palace that provides a lot of opportunities for that kind of gameplay.
Yeah, so the way we designed it, at first we tried to come up with the elements of gameplay instead of action. So we said to ourselves, okay, what are cool architectural elements that you can play with? There are columns, there are the bars, there's like the walls, and then we come up with a bunch of actions with those ingredients, with those architectural elements. That's why it's the levels and the action are really tied up. It's all the transitions between all those actions, and make sure that you don't cut. And, other games I've tried it, and I think you can feel those actions. You can really feel that there's the walk, there's the run, there's the jump, but together they don't really fit, and you have, each time you see the character stop between those actions, and we wanted to make sure that with the thumbstick, every time you press it, there's something. Every time you press X, there's something happening, and there's no really the transition between the two are really, really, really fluid.
I mean, in real life, if you were fighting 5 guys at once and you just hit one with your sword and then another one was coming up behind you, you wouldn't come back to your ready position, turn around, and then and face the other guy and then hit him. After you just completed your move, you kind of turn around, you do whatever it takes to get there. You take the straightest path between 2 points and hit the guy behind you. So to do that with a controller, the player should just have to point the analog stick at the guy he wants to hit and hit the attack button. And in order to make that happen realistically or fluidly, that meant that the animator had to come up with multiple possible linking animations, depending on exactly where in a 180-degree circle the two opponents were. And that's true for all the animations in the game. You can get from one to the other in a number of ways, which the player doesn't have to worry about, because you learn which button does which thing, and then at that point all the player has to think about is the situation. What do I want to do? Okay, I want to hit with my sword, or I want to jump. I know which button does that, but as to how to get there, that could be one of 10 or 15 different animations depending on the situation.
Yeah, and the control is really organic, because you don't have to really think about what you're doing with your controller, because like you said, the X or the square or whatever, it always does basically the same thing, and then it depends on the situation. So once you know in what situation you are, you just say, okay, now I want the attack, so I press square, and depending on how far I am from the enemy, I'll have a different animation, but I'm doing it just organically. Really, it's like, okay, there's somebody in my back and square and half. Oh, it's the animation 8, but for the player it's just an attack.
Yeah, the player should be thinking about what he wants to do, not how he's going to do it.
Exactly. I mean, every situation is in fact kind of a puzzle. It's like, really, I'm stuck in a situation, in an environment, and I know I got to open that door over there, and it's just how I'm gonna, play my character. It's almost like, playing on stage, and how I'm gonna go up there to open that door. And I'm taking the easiest example. It's not like there's only doors to open, but make sure everybody's understand. And it's really how I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna use my environment. Oh, I see bars over there, or maybe but it's too high. All right, how can I go there? Oh, I use the wall and I rebound. Oh, and now I'm grabbing the pole. All right, is it left, right, and basically you go up but there's also some really nice 3D puzzle that we come up with. And there's the defense, system in the palace, the Azad defense system, and we ask the player to really make it work, basically.
The prince rides a giant platform which he can control with 2 levers, and he's moving these axles into place, and it's kind of a magical / mechanical thing that's the sort of the beating heart of the palace's defense system. And
but we could have made it in 2D, but it's really the entire room that is the puzzle that you gotta play with. So it's a real, this time I think, a real 3D puzzle.
And that's an example of one of a few places in the game where we have a pure puzzle.
Yeah.
But in a sense, the entire game has a puzzle component in that even if it's just action, how do you get from down here to up there? The player has to think, okay, what can I do? Okay, there's a flagpole up there. There's a broken column. Mm-hmm. There's a ledge that looks like it might crumble if I step on it. And so by getting used to his own abilities, the player realizes what kind of acrobatic solutions he can find to get through these places which a normal person wouldn't be able to traverse.
And like in the 2 former Pop 1 and Prince of Persia 2, there's still some systematic gameplay ingredient. Like in the first one, you see, there was like not only booby traps but pressure plates, and you could recognize it. It's that's open. That opens the door, and so we got the same system, and like the bars. Each time the player sees a bar, say, okay, I know I can use it. Each time he sees a column, he knows, and even though sometimes we, because it's in the environment and the architecture, sometimes there's like columns that you can play with, but there's no use for them. So it's the puzzle are which column I got to use to go there. So but it's a bit systematic and hidden in the art direction.
Yeah, because with an action game where you want the player to become comfortable with the controller so that he's not stopping and thinking about each move. He's just, as with Prince of Persia 1, you get the rhythm and you're doing bam, 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 a whole series of moves. In order for that to be possible, the player has to be able to quickly recognize the elements in the game. So, for example, a bar that you can grab onto, a column that you can grab onto. These elements recur, and as Patrice just said, the combination of pressure plates and levers and gates, you learn to recognize these pressure plates so that if you're running along a wall and then you see a pressure plate, you can rebound off the wall, hit the pressure plate, bounce back, grab onto the ledge, and you can do that all, with just purely instinctive controller reactions. So that's when you start to have the fun of feeling, I'm doing it. I'm the guy who's in this dangerous situation, and yet at the same time, all of these features of the levels have to be justified in terms of what the room is. Yeah. So a bar that you can grab onto could be a branch of a tree. It could be a flagpole that's actually got a flag hanging on it in a place where there would normally be a flag. And that way the decorations that make these levels of this Persian palace so beautiful are not just for decoration, they're actually playable.
Yeah.
The Sultan's magnificent palace is inspired by the great tradition of Oriental art and architecture. The approach is pictorial and realistic, as depicted through the centuries. From medieval Persian illuminated manuscripts to 19th century French painters and the classic tales of the Arabian Nights. the youngest son of King Shahraman of Persia. Our hero is of medium height, slim, athletic, and not muscle-bound. He accidentally unleashes the Sands of Time and must use his wits and agility to save the kingdom from the catastrophe he has created. Faced with the bloody reality of combat, he outgrows his fantasies and realizes it is all about one thing: survival, his own and eventually that of the girl, the kingdom, and the world. When the sands of time escape their hourglass, they swirl like a mist along the floor until they reach the nearest victim. The victim is consumed and transformed into hideous sand men and sand women. Every man and woman in this palace is transformed by this plague. Animals, like all living things, are powerless against the sands of time. When the sands of time escape their hourglass, they rapidly spread and swirl along the floor. Birds, scarabs, lizards, and even tigers brought from India as a gift for the Sultan cannot escape. They are engulfed and transformed into horrible sand creatures.
Hi, I'm Jean-Christophe Guillaume, creative director for Prince of Persia 2. For 10 years, the Prince of Persia brand has been a defining benchmark for action-adventure gaming. So when we started imagining potential concepts for the sequel, we wanted to keep the best of the Sands of Time design, but also innovate to make the experience even more memorable. So, the concept behind Pop 2 relies on the same core values as all of the other Prince of Persia games. A very organic design that makes the experience highly immersive, outstanding controls and animations, and a mix of combat and exploration driven by an intense story. Indeed, in this genre, the player's experience is depending on the quality of the storytelling. Here, we want to put the player in a highly dramatic situation. His fate has been written, his fight is hopeless, he will die. That said, there will be a lot of unexpected developments as the game progresses. We've incorporated some special surprises guaranteed to throw gamers through a loop. To add to this drama and support this story, we also defined characters that we wanted to be absolutely memorable. For instance, players will fight enemies as diverse as the Thrall, a 20-foot giant, and a huge mythical animal called the Griffin. He'll also be hunted by the Dahaka, the Guardian of Time, that can't be defeated. As many enemies, as many gameplays was our motto. Gameplays in Pop 2 will be even more diverse than in the previous episodes. We put a lot of creative efforts into defining new enigmas, new traps, and other elements that will keep gamers on the edge of their seats with every new challenge. But the major change in terms of gameplay is certainly the brand new fighting system. The team has completely reworked the way fights are organized in Pop 2. The player will not only be able to perform new moves like grabs, decapitations, and strangulations, but he will also be able to create unique fight sequences by chaining a lot of basic moves together. We call it the free-form fighting system. Concretely, you will be able to start with a grab, and then decide whether you want to throw the enemy at another one, slice him, strangulate him, or stab a sword through his body. Another thing we introduced is the double sword combat gameplay. Pick any weapon dropped by your enemy and use it as a secondary weapon. You now have access to a series of new deadly moves with 2 weapons. Or you can utilize the new projectile aspect of freeform fighting and simply throw it at your enemy for maximum damage. We also wanted to give game players a new sense of power. The Prince is now acting with more strength and aggressivity. We paid special attention to the diversity and visual impact of the finishing moves. For instance, the double sword decapitation. For this move, we put a lot of effort into the richness of the animations, special effects like slow motion and camera angles to make it absolutely memorable. Eventually, we wanted combats in Pop 2 to be as acrobatic as the best Cloak and Dagger movies, so we used these references to create unique moves using the environment, like swinging around a pillar while slicing your enemies, stabbing your sword in a curtain and sliding down, or rebounding off walls towards your enemy. With all these new elements, we strongly believe the sequel we all imagined and hoped for is coming to fruition, and it will truly set new standards in the action genre, just like Prince of Persia Sands of Time did in 2003. Prince of Persia 2 will hit stores this November. Look for it.
I decided to get involved because I found the story interesting. There is something classic and something very original about it. For example, the prince is an archetype of Western fairy tales, and like in fairy tales, he wants to change his destiny. I like my character Kailina because she's very mysterious. She's very dangerous and intelligent, and she's fascinated by the prince because he wants to change his destiny, and she doesn't believe it is possible. She's also someone who's scared because she knows she's gonna die, and she knows her own destiny, so she's scared about it. What I like about her, that she's strong and courageous, and she's a fighter, and I think I'm a fighter too, some way. I've been always fascinated by the shadow side of life and people, and through my work I have the possibility to explore all that. It's a new experience for me, and of course I have to work hard. I need to work with a coach, because when I prepare a character in French or English, I have to work in a different way because I'm Italian. And what is challenging doing that is that when you record your voice for a video game, some way it's like if you give a soul to an animated body, and this is very funny. It's a special preparation because the only thing you have, the only thing you can use is your voice. So you need a good director to help you, because of course, you know, you don't have your body. You can use a body language. For an actor to use body language is the most important thing. So you have just your voice. So that's why I wanted to do it, because it's a completely new experience for me.
Since the beginning of the conception phase of Pop 2, our ambition has been to push the visual and graphic limits of the critically acclaimed The Sands of Time. The artistic direction and graphical treatment was one of the most prized features of The Sands of Time, and the massive challenge we face in Pop 2 will be to innovate and provide an even more exciting and unique graphical treatment. First, we started by defining the new emotion that we wanted the player to feel in Pop 2, namely fear and oppression. The player will play a prince that is cursed and that will have to face his own destiny, his own death. In this respect, the artistic direction took on a more mature and darker treatment. Visually, I wanted to place the emphasis on a realistic treatment in order for the players to be totally captivated by the game. In order to immerse the player in the game, we had to focus on color, light, textures, and detail in a unique and very specific way. I love the use of a monochromatic palette. It helped us to build the consistency throughout the game levels. It also helped us to provide emotions and also subtly put forward the key gameplay and plot elements. Each place in the game has a unique and dramatic mood and atmosphere that will help the player to orient himself. A game like Prince of Persia 2 allows each artist in our team to express themselves in very diverse universes. The player will explore a lot of various places, but they will first and foremost travel in different time periods, the past and the present. As for the characters, we had two challenges. First, we had to give the prince a new charisma, an attitude corresponding to his new combat abilities, with one constraint though: make him consistent with the Prince of the Sands of Time. We eventually made him evolve. Our new prince is a more mature character, darker, and always ready for a fight. He's now a real warrior, very self-confident, but also marked by fate. He is cursed by what is hunting him, by a death he knows can't be avoided. We wanted his armor to reflect this new orientation, with leather armor close to his body that would both protect him and also allow him to perform masterful acrobatic moves. The player will feel this character's rage, a certain violence in his attacks, and an enormous determination to face his destiny. As for the enemies, we wanted them to reflect this new direction of the game. We wanted them to appear fierce and frightening, and show attitudes and moves as distinctive as possible. As artistic director, I helped to unify the vision of the team to make one of the most visually stunning games of 2004.
There is a huge exchange of ideas between video games and cinema. Films often get inspiration from certain game-like elements, and games have come to use Hollywood-style production and storytelling to try and achieve the same emotional impact that only film could. But as filmmaking went through a creative calm patch, video games were going up. This new maturity comes from teams like this one. We are in Montreal in the studios of Ubisoft, where around 100 people have been working on Prince of Persia: Warrior Within for over a year now. For the sequel to Prince of Persia Sands of Time, Ubisoft Montreal has chosen a darker, even more cinematic approach.
We wanted to focus on the main character, the prince. Why and how he has changed. He's very different from the prince we met in the Sands of Time. The head animator of Belleville Rendezvous, Hugh Martel, helped us out. Starting with the storyboards, Hugh and I worked on sketching the environments, and together with Raphael Lacoste, the artistic director, we decided to hire actors to film live-action sequences.
We rented a studio with friends from the Two Worlds Theater. It's not really a proper studio, but there was enough space to work in. Obviously, 2 days of filming is really short. It was all organized at the last minute. I called some actor friends from the theater, and there were 2 cameramen with mini DV cams. We put them on roller skates to get the traveling shots done quicker. We only had 2 days to get 15 minutes of footage finished. There was no lighting, no crew. We took the camera and decided the shots on the spot, keeping our drawings in mind as a guideline, but there were just the actors on stage. No scenery, just a few costumes and basic props. A wooden sword, a cape. It helped us keep the speed up, get the shots quickly with the actor, and keep a certain spontaneity. That's what I really wanted. So when the animation team started working on the project, they had visual inspiration for the movements and emotions they had to represent. The direction of the project came from those videos. They became our reference videos. Filming live takes a few seconds, but doing the same thing in animation can take weeks. So when you tell an animator, that's not bad, but I don't think the character has the emotion I was looking for, it's not because he's doing a bad job.
Although a computer is an excellent way of doing calculations, it's not the animator's fault that a simple camcorder can often be more helpful when experimenting with ideas. The cutscenes in Prince of Persia: Warrior Within have a very cinematic feel to them. Hardly surprising, you might say, as they're called cinematic scenes. But even the sound effects have been approached in the same way, created as a Foley track, meaning live and not with a computer.
For the sound effects, we were looking for more visceral sounds, like bones cracking or guts exploding. It's a lot bloodier. When the prince slashes through his enemies, you really have to hear it. We had a specialist come in for all the cracking sounds, the sword slashes, the blood spurting, all that was done in Foley. He brought his own kit, like dry pasta for breaking bones. For the sound of slicing enemies into a million pieces, we had oranges, grapefruits, and cabbages to cut. We used all sorts of stuff like that for those sounds. It made them more sharp, more real.
So, as we're talking about cinema, let's get to the bottom of it. Give us some names.
There aren't hundreds of influences for Prince of Persia: Warrior Within, but they are all carefully thought through, carefully selected and used. I think that the team's basic ideas came from swashbuckling films or Hong Kong movies with lots of action, and the hero using his environment in amazing ways. In Hong Kong movies, they are always bouncing back from a wall, grabbing a baton, and decapitating the guy opposite. From very early on, there was a desire to extend the swashbuckling feel to other parts of the game, such as the conversations between the prince and the enemies, with them taunting each other and stuff like that, a bit like in the films.
The player is introduced to each level by means of a long continuous shot showing the various interactive elements of the decor, not unlike films featuring another fan of action.
Jackie Chan is obviously a major inspiration. Initially, we wondered whether the prince should even have a main weapon. We wanted him to be able to fight with his hands, picking up weapons as he goes. Then we thought that we didn't want him to actually become Jackie Chan. He's the Prince of Persia, a hardened warrior who is never without his sword, and knows how to use other weapons too. We also wanted to give the player a sense of freedom. So we created different ways of interacting with the environment that are very much inspired by Jackie Chan. Like all the swinging around pillars, the way he can attack whilst running along a wall, project himself off walls. Or the way the prince can grab his enemies and throw them or do different attacks on them.
But there are more than just Hong Kong movie influences in the game, especially if you study the look of it.
Obviously, The Lord of the Rings is the biggest film of the last 3 years, and graphically, a very big inspiration, whether it's for the colors or the characters.
The Prince of Persia series always liked films. The original creator, Jordan Mechner, is sort of a game designer, scriptwriter, and documentary maker all rolled into one. Prince of Persia was one of the first games to include cinematic cutscenes.
The presentation of Prince of Persia 1 was really inspired by silent movies. You know, in the days before movies had dialogue and sound, you know, they told the story with title cards and very simple vignettes. I really tried to tell the story of the game like a silent movie with little cutscenes after certain levels that would advance the action.
This clip is taken from an interview conducted in Montreal in 2003 when the making of Sands of Time was filmed. But now, for Warrior Within, no sign of Jordan Mechner.
When Jordan isn't in Montreal, he's in Los Angeles, writing the screenplay for a live-action Disney film, backed by Jerry Bruckheimer.
Jerry Bruckheimer. It's okay, everyone makes the same mistake. He's the producer of The Rock, of course. But let's rather have a look at the story of the game, which is far removed from a Whoopi Goldberg comedy.
In the previous game, the prince was able to turn back and alter time at certain points. He can completely change his destiny by traveling back in time, doing the biggest rewind in history. But we're not supposed to change our destiny, and the prince's actions have unleashed the Dahaka, the guardian of time, determined to eliminate all temporal paradoxes. The prince is a paradox, considering the events that took place. He shouldn't exist. By opening the Sands of Time, he has corrupted the timeline and must die. The prince has the crazy idea of going to the island of time where the Sands of Time were created, hoping to travel back to before their creation. So that's an interesting element. The prince travels back in time, and that allows us to flesh out the unexplained mythology from the Sands of Time, like the creation of the sands, where they come from, why, how, etc. It complements and completes the first game.
To put up with a character that's cursed, hunted, let's face it, he's doomed. The game had to look right, too. Judge for yourself what he's done.
It was a team decision to do something a bit different, a change of style from the Sands of Time. We realized that the initial character was too Arabian Nights, too nice actually. So we really wanted a marked difference this time. We'd all worked on the first game. We didn't want to do the same thing twice. So we said, let's do a real sequel, part 2, not part 1.5. But how? So we asked ourselves, what's happened to him since last time? Look at the story from the character's point of view. He has, after all, made a monumental blunder. When he opens the Sands of Time, everyone he holds dear dies under his eyes. He manages to more or less repair things in the end. But it doesn't end there. That's why it's an interesting license. With each new game, we add a little more to the saga. To be honest, though, by the end of the Prince of Persia Sands of Time project, we didn't know that Prince of Persia Warrior Within would continue the story.
So, the new prince's look went through a few changes, and a few hybrid princes were tried out. Let's have a look at a few of them.
This design on the left was part of a series that was supposed to help make our prince better than the previous one. Apart from his really determined-looking posture, and the fact that he's bigger, more muscled, it's still very reminiscent of the previous prince. Nothing really like the new prince that was perfected over several months. The evolution of the character came slowly, and this sort of design made us realize that we had to take things a lot farther.
The development stage of the character is what filmmakers call pre-production. It went pretty quickly on Warrior Within, as the whole game took just a year to develop, even if many different ideas were tried out.
It's as diverse as other games, which are a lot more open, with you roaming freely in the deserts on horseback, and objectives that are less clear. Rather than finding yourself in a strange world after having died, a bit more mystic than visiting the 7 wonders of the world or finding the elements of time hidden in different parts of a garden. But we knew that we'd left ourselves some possibilities open with the final majestic twist of the Sands of Time. We could come back to the story and use it to continue developing a very particular side of the character. Darker, more mature, more determined.
And to get a result like this, the Ubisoft Montreal team looked to the movie world again.
Lots of the character's traits and motivation became clear later on, especially when we brought a couple of special agents on board, Hollywood scriptwriters that we worked with. We flew them into Montreal, put them in with the production and creative teams, and one of them, Corey, stayed on a really long time, working with the teams on the story, working with the level designers, adjusting the character's profile, changing the dialogues, etc. The story and the adventure, the gameplay. After watching the scriptwriters at work, we realized that they were really the best people to write the story. Professionals. In Hollywood, there are a lot of talented people who can write a story better than a game designer. We always thought the game designers could write stories perfectly well. We were wrong. It's interesting what we tried to do with the writers, working on an emotional curve that has an impact on the game scenario and the gameplay, but also making sure that the player's actions are respected. We tried to create moments of suspense, dramatic moments.
To make sure the look of the game evolved in the right direction, the studio decided very early on to call in a group of artists. Their preparatory work was the basis for the dark Prince of Persia.
Above all, he added his own unique style, his special touch. Thanks, Patrick. How was Nicholas? Thanks, Bruno. Goodbye, Patrick. Let's meet the artists. This is Nicholas, who worked on a lot of the environments and quite a few characters. A whole load of environments and a bit on the marketing. In fact, he added his own touch to the prince. All the marketing drawings are his. From the very beginning, there were 3 or 4 full-time illustrators on the project, which was great for us and for them. It allowed me to explain to our 3D modelers very early on what I was looking for. We didn't start off in 5 different directions, for example. We never said, let's try out this style and this style. We knew we wanted something a bit gothic, something with instant visual strength, something epic. And all these elements come from our various personalities. Michael Labat, the artistic director, already had a personality that helped him really understand these influences, and that contributed to what the game is today.
Even if Prince of Persia Warrior Within is much more gothic, the prince himself is the main focus of this shift in style. Pursued by the Daharka and scenes much like something out of Alien, the prince has changed. Reprieved from death, he looks like he has stepped out of a nightmare or an asylum.
Le prince lui-même est très sombre.
The prince himself is very dark, very strongly outlined, highlighted by his willful character. We gave him leather straps that bite into him a bit, really have him tightly bound in leather. That's what gives him his character, this extreme darkness that comes from certain nasty events in the past. All that gives a real atmosphere that is miles away from the adventurous explorer prince in the previous episode.
With all these changes, this fifth installment in the Prince of Persia saga still remains astonishingly close to its 15-year-old relative.
In my opinion, the three major strengths of the license have been there since the very first release in 1989. First, there's the animated cut pieces that tell the story. Prince of Persia 1 was the first game to have cutscenes, or perhaps it was Karateka, but it's the same guy anyway. Then there's the character animation, and lastly, the level design. I'd have to add that there's also an intensity, despite the simplicity of the combat. I don't know if you remember, but in Prince of Persia 1 there were, what, 2 movements? It was block and attack, block and attack. You had 3 life points, with only 2 left and 1. You had to time your attack just right, otherwise it wouldn't work. It was easy to play, but so intense that people still remember it. More blood, more fast action, a gameplay that's even more than before, and a lot more combos.
The combat system from Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, which game players and even the development team found a little repetitive, has been completely rethought. The new version is based on a free-form fighting interface, leaving the player unimaginable freedom during combat.
The strong points of Sands of Time is the free-form fighting. This system of fighting that gives enormous freedom to the player. We know it already, acrobatics during combat, using traps, using 2 weapons. The prince will be able to pick up loads of weapons during the game. Beyond that, the time powers are also back.
The rewind, or the way the prince can go back in time, was one of the biggest new features of Prince of Persia Sands of Time. But even if the all-new combat system is undoubtedly one of the stars of the sequel, the rewind is still one of the game's strong points.
And the other powers are really linked to the combat system in order to make them stronger and more useful in a fight. In the Sands of Time, you could use them, but it wasn't strictly essential. In Warrior Within, there are situations where you don't have much choice. For the slow motion, slowing down time, the difference with the Sands of Time is that the prince isn't affected.
Strangely, with all these new special effects and a look that is nothing like the original Arabian Nights atmosphere, Warrior Within is probably closer to the very first Prince of Persia than Sands of Time was.
As for the traps, for a while we wanted to go back to the very first Prince of Persia and make the traps lethal. We couldn't really do it though because the gameplay has a series of traps that requires acrobatics. We had long discussions with Jean-Christophe, and I would have loved traps that cut you in half, but we couldn't really. It would have been too frustrating for the player. So we made them more deadly, but not absolutely lethal, and we tried to create combinations of traps that are much more dangerous.
Level design is really the art of making something challenging out of the environments created by the programmers. In other words, the level designer adds the traps, the puzzles, the enemies, and makes sure that the level is still playable.
The level design was pretty good in Prince of Persia The Sands of Time, but in Prince of Persia Warrior Within, it's mind-blowing. We kept 3 out of the original 4-person team. These guys live and breathe Prince of Persia. And all they could think about was, look, in Prince of Persia Warrior Within, we are going to make the levels absolutely amazing.
And they did it. The prince is able to go back thousands of years back in the past, which means there are two versions of the levels, past and present, which didn't lighten the workload of the level designers one bit.
If you want to create a gameplay environment based in two eras, you start by destroying it, as the passing of time would. So that's what we did. We built a level based in the past, when it had been built. Then once we had worked out the gameplay, the rhythm and a real sense of atmosphere, we started demolishing it. We take a wrecking ball to the level and find another way to go through it. We have to understand that hundreds, even thousands of years have passed between the two eras. So we really had a lot of scope to destroy the environment. If I had to choose which version of the level is easier to do, I'd have to say the destructed one. Because we can easily justify holes or blocks of stone that help the prince get to trees or reach a part of the decor which were unattainable in the built-up version.
By the way, Ubisoft Studios have a playtest area where the programmers and above all the level designers have their levels tested by gamers like you and I.
We already had the Sands of Time as a reference, so we tried to add in even more things. We really wanted to keep the rhythm up. We've really made a sequel that can stand by itself. It's a totally different game. I hope that everyone has managed to feel at ease, to get inside the game. I've been working in video games for 9 years now, and I've never had such a talented team.
A talented team, a cinematic style, and a healthy budget for what can be called one of the biggest small-screen productions of late 2004. So the producers decided to treat themselves to a few big names like Monica Bellucci, who lends her vocal talents to the game, and the American hard rock band Godsmack.
When we researched the music for the project, there were several groups that we used as references for the new direction we wanted for the combats, the action scenes. That's when we came across Godsmack. It was great for both of us. The guys from the group were really happy, and so were we.
So there you go. That's the end of this making of. Ubisoft did ask us, however, to keep some of the biggest new features of the game a secret. So I can't really tell you about the numerous chests around the levels containing all sorts of weapons, the artworks to unlock, or the bonus costumes for the prince. And I definitely can't mention the alternative ending and all the rest. So the only way to discover everything is to get playing.
It seems to me that the people who really like Prince of Persia are very polarized, maybe because we've done very polarizing games. Sands of Time was set in a very fairy tale Arabian Nights universe. With the young prince, it was very distinct, it had a different tone. Warrior Within, we wanted to explore the origins of the Sands of Time, so you would go back in the past, explore a universe that was a little bit more Persian than Arabic because the architecture is a little bit more ancient. We wanted to give a different feeling and experience. But there's the very interesting turning point in the middle in his kind of quest for redemption or quest for answers, where he realizes that his own actions are forging his future, which is a very interesting aspect of the game. We really wanted to have an enemy that would affect the gameplay, so that's why
a little bit how the idea behind the Dahaka appeared. We've upgraded the combat system quite a lot with a lot of different moves, so you get a little bit more freedom in the way you want to address the situation. Find different kind of pacing and mix acrobatics and combats with special enemies. It's really cool and impressive to see the exact same set pieces translated into this little handheld device with all the actual controls and everything. I was clearly impressed. You can do the actual combos, so you can jump over a guy and then attack him or throw him, and so you have all the complex combo that we established that are still available. It's really interesting to discover the clever ways that the controls were implemented on the iPhone, and also to see that nothing was sacrificed for the controls. You still have all the options available for everything you wanted to do. I really like the general concept of iPhone games. I like to play a lot, and I like to play when I actually travel and move. It's becoming also a very open platform that is easy to access because it's something that you actually have. It's very easy to access the games through the App Store. There's always these games that you have a nostalgia towards and you want to play again, but you don't have the console anymore. So this kind of portable playing ability is really cool for this kind of things. You can really get a chance to play through these old games again, and it's fun. The iPhone version, I was really surprised because when I actually played it, it was surprising how close it was. When I saw the actual graphics, like it was a flush of memories who came back. The fans of the series will definitely be happy to have a portable version of the game.
I am on set right now with Ben Mattis, who's a producer of Prince of Persia 3. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
How's the show been for you guys?
Oh, I've had a really, really good time. I have to admit, this is actually my first time at E3, so it's been a little bit overwhelming, but it's been a wonderful experience. The Ubisoft booth is absolutely amazing. All the games are getting a really good reception. In particular, I like to thank Prince of Persia 3, so I'm really happy.
And how are people responding to it?
Really well, actually. I mean, I was talking to you a little bit earlier about this, but it's been a really encouraging response. I mean, we know that Prince of Persia 3 is a trilogy. There's things here that people have seen. I mean, we always set out to create a trilogy from the very beginning, and we're wrapping that trilogy up. That said, though, there are certain gameplay mechanics that people, they see and they recognize, and yet they're really keen into the innovation that we're bringing to the title. The feedback that we've been receiving has been very positive about how they like what we're doing. They like how we're taking the best of Sands of Time, the best of Warrior Within, and creating this new opus that really kind of wraps the Sands of Time trilogy up. So the feedback has been very, very encouraging indeed.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about the game. Tell us about the story, what happens in Prince of Persia 3.
Sure.
And then you have a demo, too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I'll play
Excellent.
through the demo.
Great.
Okay, so Prince of Persia 3, we've got a bunch of ambitions for it. Like I said, we really want to wrap up the trilogy with this one. We want to go out with a bang. Our primary motivation is to really redefine the pace of the action-adventure genre. I mean, Prince of Persia sort of set the bar. Sands of Time sort of set the bar. We've got to raise it again. We do this by making sure that the player throughout the game is under a constant sense of pressure. From start to finish, while he's running through the city of Babylon, he's always got that sense of pressure. We have a couple of key emotions that we use to communicate that. I'll talk a little bit about. The first one is the feeling of being hunted. The city is overrun, occupied by an enemy army, and throughout the game they're pursuing the prince, they're chasing him through the city. He's one against many, and that feeling of constantly being pursued will certainly keep the player on their toes. The second is this emotion of being haunted. There's an evil presence dogging the prince's steps every step of the way, and I'll get a little bit more into that in just a minute. Yep. And then the third major thing that we use to kind of tie this all together is taking the game outside into this new urban environment. The game takes place in the city of Babylon, up on the rooftops, down in the alleys and in the streets. The player's no longer confined to sort of long, narrow hallways and underground caverns. We're really kind of taking it outside and then opening up the doors to that. To succeed in Prince of Persia 3, we really want the player to have to do three things. They're going to have to think fast. They're going to identify the situation, see a window of opportunity, take advantage of it. Obviously, they're going to have to act fast, and then they're going to have to kill fast, and you'll see that as well when I do the demo.
Great. Well, why don't we jump right in?
All right.
And while you're setting that up, there's a question here from Andreas, who's been emailing all morning from the Netherlands. I don't think he's sleeping or doing much. He's always here. Thanks for emailing. Will you put in an online feature for the Xbox in actual online play? So will there be an online component?
Sure. We're certainly considering the opportunities of Xbox Live and what it brings to the table. Some of the things we're thinking about are ways that we can add on to the gameplay with value add, perhaps some new maps, some new downloadables and whatnot. At its core, Prince of Persia is a single-player game. We're telling a story, and that's certainly where we're focusing. We don't have plans to change that with sort of cooperative online play. We're going to focus on the single-player experience and make sure that that's really well received.
Great. All right.
So story-wise, Prince of Persia 3 takes place right where the warrior within left off. The prince has returned to the city, has returned to Babylon. He's expecting a hero's welcome. As soon as he arrives, though, he quickly realizes he's going to get anything but that. He's expecting his father, the king, to roll out the red carpet, but instead, when he arrives at the city, he sees that it's under siege by this hostile army that's trying to take over the city, and he has to fight through them in order to save his city and save his people. Something I mentioned a little bit earlier on is this fast-paced action. What we're introducing is something we call the speed kill system. It's very dynamic. It's very rewarding. It showcases the prince's acrobatic skills. It showcases the prince's combat skills and allows him to quickly turn the tides in his favor. He cannot possibly hope to win this war through strength of arm alone, right? It's him against an army, and these guys are good. So in order to succeed, he takes advantage of the level opportunities, the situational awareness, and he turns the tide into his favor by quickly eliminating enemies in a one-shot kill, like you're going to see right here. Very dramatic, very rewarding. It's not about sneaking. It's about fast and furious action that rewards the player with a quick, furious kill. These speed kills can be chained together, so after you do one, like that fallen enemy, you grabbed his sword, you chained it together by throwing the sword at another enemy, and chain together the speed kill to take two out at once. After this loading screen, you're going to see a transformation between the Light Prince to the Dark Prince. The Dark Prince is a second major innovation that we're bringing to Prince of Persia 3. It's the first time in the Prince of Persia franchise that we've had a second playable character. Story-wise, the Dark Prince comes to play at the very beginning of the game. The prince is infected by the Sand of Time. He's thrown away the amulet, and he no longer has the protection that comes from that. And as the sand infects him and spreads through his body, the Dark Prince becomes more and more powerful. The Dark Prince is the physical manifestation of all of the prince's weakest personality traits. Throughout the first two Prince of Persias, you saw a lot of hints of these. You saw hints of recklessness. You saw hints of brashness, of sadism, being very sadistic. Those all really come to light with the Dark Prince. He really represents all that is the weakest and the most evil in the prince, and he's a fully playable character now.
And how does he emerge? How does he come into the game?
Well, the transformation mechanic that you saw there was one we're exploring, which is fire. So the prince voluntarily will create a fire. He'll walk into that fire, and the agony of having his skin burned by the flames unleashes the sands, and the sands sort of take over his body, and the Dark Prince comes out. And then vice versa, the water of life that we know so well from the first two Prince of Persias, that will be the transformation mechanic back into the Light Prince.
Now, can he harness the bad and use it for good? I mean, what does this evil twin serve?
Well, a lot of the game is the sort of dichotomy between the two characters. We really want to play off the emotional sort of feedback between the two of them. When you are the Light Prince, you have the Dark Prince in your mind saying, do this, do this, do this. And vice versa, when you are the Dark Prince, you'll have the Light Prince trying to guide you towards the right path. So there'll always be both. As the playable characters, they have different sets of skills and of opportunities. One thing I'm about to show you is, if you look at this arm here, there's a chain. This chain is very tightly integrated into our story. I don't want to give it away too much, but suffice it to say, it's something that the Dark Prince can use, but the Light Prince cannot. That opens up a whole new level opportunity in terms of level design for us, in terms of ways that the Dark Prince can interact with characters and environments, and the way he can kill enemies. So I'll just give you an example of the way that this thing works, right? So what he did there is he did a wall run. He then did a chain where he used it almost like to swing, and then launched into a speed kill with that chain. if you notice, there's sort of a halo going on around the Dark Prince. One thing we really want to try and create with this is give the player the idea of what it would be like to play to see the world through the eyes of a sand creature. That is, in effect, what the Dark Prince is. He is the prince infected by the sands. So as the game progresses, you'll see the world slightly change in terms of how it's perceived, with a filter effect that makes everything look a lot more sandy, a lot more grainy.
Oh, that's great. And the lighting effects are really interesting,
Yeah,
too.
thank you. We certainly we really listened to what the fans liked about Sands of Time and what they liked about Warrior Within. We certainly like the artistic direction of Sands of Time, the brightness, the light colors. It works really well with the city of Babylon. It works really well with the environment. It's important to point out that as this game takes place, as the prince is going through his quest, there is a war going on. The city of Babylon is being attacked by this army, and you'll see that with corpses around. You'll see that with explosions happening all the time. This is a constant reminder to the player that there is in fact this war going on, and that will certainly play into some of the choices that the player and the prince have to make throughout the game.
Excellent. Oh, we have a question from Simon in the UK. He wants to know how many weapons will be in the game and what are they?
Well,
besides
no problem. Each character certainly has their own special weapon. The Dark Prince has the chain. The Prince doesn't have access to that, as I said earlier. The Light Prince has his sword. The Dark Prince doesn't necessarily, or his dagger rather, the Dark Prince doesn't necessarily have access to that. So they each have their unique weapon that is their key weapon, and that has special skills that they can use with that. On top of that, we also have weapons that you can pick up from fallen enemies. Those can be used, like I said earlier, to chain together the speed kill systems. We don't want to give away too much information about all of the kinds of weapons in the game. For now, I'd like to just kind of leave it to the chain and the dagger, which are the unique weapons of the two characters.
Okay.
What I'm about to just show you here is a big payoff, I think, for the for the player and for the Prince of Persia franchise. The city of Babylon, the rooftops. Like I said earlier, we're taking the player out of the dungeons, out of the palaces, and we're bringing them into a big open city. And up on the rooftops of Babylon, it's really where the prince's acrobatic skills allow him to reign supreme. So up here, he has the strategic advantage, the positional awareness that comes from being up high and seeing his enemies from far, and he can turn that to his advantage. When he's in the streets, when he's running away through the alleyways, of course he's being pursued, but up here he is the master, and we really think that shows through in the way that he can just quickly take his enemies out before they even have a chance to react.
You know, I hate to do this to you because we have questions pouring in faster than I can possibly get to them, and it looks like I need to wrap. We're going to head to a package. Thank you so much for showing us. I wish we had more time, but people here can see and play on the show floor.
Yeah, we're at the Ubisoft booth. They can come by anytime.
Head over. And release date?
The release date is holiday this year, 2005.
Holiday this year.
Holiday,
Perfect timing.
4 major platforms.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Thank you so much.
Taking a look at Prince of Persia 3, first thing I gotta ask you, does Prince of Persia 3 pick up where Warriors Within left off?
Absolutely. The city is ravaged by war, and everyone is turned against him. And the cool thing is that for the first time in the series, we are putting the player into a dramatic situation of emergency. For the first time, the prince is hunted, and the prince has to, defend itself in the most efficient way. Speed kill system in a totally new setting, and for the first time ever in the series, the introduction of a totally new, fully playable character. Yeah, the Dark Prince is another version of the prince because the prince has been, corrupted by the sands, and the more you progress through the game, the more, the corruption grows. More than ever, this game is going to be a perfect mix of both. It's not a fighting game per se 100% of the time. It's full-packed action with fighting elements, and it also contains some really cool ingredients that are fun to play. And the game is anyway very level design intensive, but we're expanding the thing to the new scope and the new setting of Babylon City. Here, we're thinking outdoors. Basically, in a nutshell, Prince of Persia 3 is as unique as Sands of Time and as action-packed as Warrior Within for the final bang of the trilogy. You don't have the full Prince of Persia experience if you don't play Prince of Persia 3.
Hi everybody, welcome to the first developer diary for Prince of Persia 3. My name is Ben Mattis and I'm the producer on Pop 3. Prince of Persia 3 is the climax of the Sands of Time trilogy. In Pop 3, the prince returns home to the city of Babylon. In terms of artistic direction, our ambition is to create a brand new outdoor urban environment. We use this outdoor urban environment to communicate three main feelings to the player. In Prince of Persia 3, the prince has just returned home to the city of Babylon. The events take place directly after Warrior Within.
Je m'appelle Olivier Leonardi et je suis le directeur artistique de Prince of Persia 3.
To recreate Babylon, we took our inspiration from real Oriental cities like Cairo in Egypt, or the Medinas of Marrakesh and Casablanca in Morocco. They've inspired the color palette, textures, and architecture of Prince of Persia 3. The pre-production phase was done by Ubisoft's studio in Casablanca, allowing us to draw on the daily life of the team to lend authenticity to the environment. So, for Pop 3, we created a city full of contrasts, everything from the mighty palace to the lowly sewers, the temples to the arena.
On a premièrement un contraste entre la ville haute et la
In Pop 3, we have a lighter high city, synonymous with wealth and prosperity. We also have a darker low city, home to the poor and decrepit, which will be less decorated and more rustic. The prince will visit several interiors of homes, like kitchens, living rooms, and bedrooms. All these interiors are completely furnished and decorated with everyday items. The prince's adventure will take place over several days, allowing the player to experience Babylon by both day and night. We've used all these elements to make Babylon a living city, which will create a feeling of wonder and richness.
In the outdoor environment of Babylon, the player has an all-new sense of freedom. No longer is he being confined to the long, narrow corridors of the palaces from Sands of Time or the island from Warrior Within.
In Babylon, the players will feel a strong sense of freedom and openness, culminating with the spectacular rooftops from which they can best see the city below. High on the rooftops, the player can see foes and objectives from a distance. Players will also get the opportunity to explore different districts of Babylon by foot or by chariot.
The Babylon rooftops are a huge payoff for the player. The amazing heights combined with the prince's acrobatic skills will give the player a very strong sense of vertigo.
Each building has a lighting gradient with a darker base leading up to a highlighted roof. When the prince is in the streets, this claustrophobic environment will serve to reinforce the feeling of being hunted. When he's on the rooftops, he is the predator. The Tower of Babel is divided into two parts. The first part is inspired by the bark of a tree, a defensive layer that protects the palace from enemy projectiles or sandstorms. The second part, the Royal Palace, is much more open, with terraces, apartments, the throne room, and the famous hanging gardens. All of this splendor overlooks the whole city of Babylon. The tower's height is around 170 meters. This element accentuates the feeling of vertigo, as the player will climb it from the outside.
The artists on Prince of Persia 3 have done a magnificent job in creating this fabulous world for you to explore, the fantasy city of Babylon. Despite the technical challenges of creating this ancient Oriental city, we're very proud of what we've accomplished, and we're convinced you'll have a wonderful time exploring this universe and enjoy the world we've created for you in Prince of Persia 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to the second developer diary for Prince of Persia 3. The first developer diary was on the artistic direction. This time we're going to focus on the character and story. In Prince of Persia 3, we want the prince to become a truly epic hero.
In Sands of Time, the prince is young and naive, and as a result, he inadvertently unleashes the Sands of Time. In Warrior Within, the prince finds himself hunted by
invincible creature known as the Dahaka, which is spawned as a result of his mistake. In Prince of Persia 3, the prince returns home to find that his kingdom of Babylon has been invaded by a hostile army. And over the course of the game, he's going to have to find out who's responsible for this, and eventually he's going to have to take them down. Early on in the game, he's going to be struck by the Sands of Time, and part of him will become infected by them. The corruption is going to spread. In addition to this, whenever he enters a moment of crisis, the sands are literally going to take over his body. He's going to transform into the Dark Prince.
In Prince of Persia 3, we have a second playable character, the Dark Prince. The Dark Prince is a corrupt version of the Prince who is infected by the Sands of Time.
He's a manifestation of all of his negative personality traits. So he's ruthless, he's reckless, he lacks a moral compass, he's extremely violent and takes great pleasure in engaging in brutal combat. The Dark Prince functions as the devil on the prince's shoulder. He's charming, he's seductive, but he's definitely dark in his motives and desires. The Dark Prince's goal is very similar to that of the prince's. Someone has taken their throne, and he wants to assist the prince in reclaiming it.
The story in Prince of Persia 3 starts with the prince and Kylina returning from the island of time. They arrive in the city of Babylon to find that it's occupied by an evil enemy army and the city is under siege.
She becomes the voice of the narrator. She's going to be telling us the story. As a supernatural entity, she has an objectivity and perspective that our other mortal characters don't.
Fans of the series will be really happy to know that we've heard your cries. Farah is making a triumphant return to the Prince of Persia series.
What she's doing in Babylon is related to the invading army. Once the prince and Farah are reunited, they'll be spending quite a bit of time together, just as they did in Sands of Time.
So you've just learned a little bit about the characters and the stories of Prince of Persia 3. Of course, there's a lot of surprises left waiting for you. You'll have to play the game to find out more. Stay tuned next time for the third installment of the Prince of Persia 3 Developer Diary. Hi everyone, and welcome to the third Prince of Persia Development Diaries. To start today, I'm very excited to announce our official title, Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones. Last time in the Developer Diary, we focused on the story and the characters of the game. This time we're going to focus on the animation and the AI. A hallmark of the Prince of Persia franchise has always been the quality of the animations. In The Two Thrones, we want to raise the bar once again, creating a whole new set of animations with that Prince of Persia touch.
We've put in place a team of highly trained animators who are now developing and animating hundreds and hundreds of new moves. In this third installment, we have the speed kill system, which is not only going to be a blast for the player, but it was also a blast for us as animators to put together. We were able to focus on dynamic posing, dynamic animation, and really just try to nail the wow factor for our second playable character, the Dark Prince. He's an evil version of the Prince of Persia. This character is sadistic in nature. We've had to make a whole new set of animation for him, reflecting his personality. He has a chain, and this chain will enable him to get to different places in the map, places that the prince is unable to get to.
To complement the excellent work being done by our animation team, the programmers on The Two Thrones are putting a lot of attention to the AI to rework the enemy behaviors from the ground up to make them very challenging but very rewarding for you to play against.
Okay, what we wanted to do was to break away from the generic enemy types that we see in other video games. So basically we came up with design of enemies that each had their own different personalities that were very strong and intelligent, so that the speed kill system would be interesting and challenging to the player. What we put together is the Sandgate system, which is basically a backup or reinforcement system. If a Sandgate guard sees the prince or hears him, he can call for reinforcements. Anytime the player misses his speed kill, he can use the rewind time power to make things right and get the speed kill correct.
So we talked today about the cool new animations you'll get to experience and the challenging and rewarding enemies you'll fight against in The Two Thrones. It's not done yet. Tune in next time for another Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones Development Diary. Hi everyone, and welcome back to this, the 4th developer diary for the Prince of Persia, The Two Thrones. Last time we focused on the animation and the AI. This time, we're going to talk about the freeform fighting system and the all-new spectacular speed kill system. In Prince of Persia, The Two Thrones, the prince has returned to Babylon, his hometown. He finds that it's ravaged by war, under siege by an enemy army who are hunting him. He's a fugitive in his own town. He must adapt to the situation, developing new techniques to take his enemies down, like the all-new speed kill system.
So there's a whole acrobatic approach to the opponent where you have to find your way on the rooftops, on the walls, etc., to progress through the city and go to an enemy and then surprise. But there's also a strategic aspect to the speed kill system. In a lot of situations, the player will have to think before he acts, analyze the situation, and then perform the speed kill. Enemies can cover each other, guards patrolling, seeing each other, so you cannot attack a guard when another one is seeing it. We also have what we call the sand gate, which is basically an alarm system. When the prince comes close to a sand gate, he will notice that there's guards and a special guard, the sand gate guard, who has the ability to trigger the sand gate and call in reinforcements. If you fail a speed kill, the result will be that you will enter a fight. And throughout the game, you can choose whether you want to go more of a fighting strategy or more of a speed kill strategy and approach any situation the way you'd like.
In order to defeat your enemies, you'll be able to use the speed kill system, but we've also brought back the freeform fighting system for the Prince, plus added an all-new hand-to-hand combat style for the Dark Prince.
The Dark Prince uses the Dagger of Time and the Dagger Tail, which is a long chain that he uses like a whip in order to attack his enemies. And he's also able to use the Dagger Tail as a shield. By rotating it very fast, he keeps enemies at bay. And he's then able to perform special finishing moves, a horizontal slash and a vertical slash. He's also able to grab his enemies and attract them to him and then perform a killing blow. The Dark Prince is also able to use the environment to his advantage. For example, he can grab a column with the dagger tail and rotate around it, killing everyone in between himself and the column.
We've just presented to you the all-new speed kill system and the all-new freeform fighting system. There's more in store, so stay tuned next time for the 5th installment of the Developer Diaries for Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones. Hi everyone, my name is Ben Mattis, and welcome to the 5th and final Prince of Persia Developer Diary. Last time we talked to you about the speed kill and the freeform fighting system. Today we're going to talk about the music and the ambient audio in The Two Thrones. But now you're all well aware of the environment where the game takes place. The prince's hometown, the city of Babylon, ravaged by war. In order to make the environment feel very realistic and immersive, we paid particular attention to the music and the ambient audio.
In The Two Thrones, you'll hear the sounds of war raging all around the outskirts of Babylon. You'll also hear the sounds and the voices of enemies fighting at close range, projectile weapons impacting the oppressed citizens of Babylon being forced through the streets.
The Two Thrones is probably the best looking, most atmospheric game to come out in the last 5 years. And my job as a composer is to continue that atmosphere in the music and to immerse the gamer and to bring you back in time to ancient Babylon. The Two Thrones is by far the most epic of the 3 games, so it called for large, bombastic, powerful passages.
When we started working on Prince of Persia, we really wanted to have a sort of a Hollywood soundtrack. This cannot be accomplished with MIDI only. The human element, the human effect, the warmth, the little imperfections, and the size, cannot be accomplished by MIDI.
The prince is infected by the Sands of Time, giving rise to the Dark Prince, the personification of all of the prince's weakest and most negative personality traits. In order to really reflect this duality, we paid particular attention to the music and the ambient audio in the game.
Duality will be emphasized by the voice acting. We chose Yuri Lowenthal as the prince and Rick Miller as the Dark Prince.
No,
It is silly to think such things.
Throughout the story, both characters, the Prince and the Dark Prince, are constantly talking to each other through inner dialogue. These narrative techniques will help us further the story and develop the Prince's character.
We tried to find sort of like a duality using the more warm orchestral sound for the Prince and then some more synthetic sounds for the evil twin.
So that wraps up our presentation about the in-game musical scores and ambient audio. The entire Prince of Persia production team would like to thank you for taking the time to learn more about this exciting game. We hope you enjoy it when it comes out in just a few short weeks.
One of the early things we wanted to do with the game is play on the duality. We wanted the Prince to experience the sands of time from a completely new point of view. So this time he will experience what the sands do to people. They transform them and transform them into these sand creatures that are mostly evil. So it will be the conflict between the Prince and his dark side. So that's why the two thrones, because in the end it's what Prince will win the battle. I think it was very important for us from the beginning to bring this trilogy somewhere and to end it, because it gives a goal. And I mean, if a game cannot continue endlessly without going somewhere, so it's very important for us to finish it. So that's what we wanted to do with this game, and I think that it really brings the evolution of the character throughout the three games to an interesting point. For the mood and the general setting, we wanted it to be something quite in between Sands of Time and Warrior Within. So but we also wanted to keep the interesting storytelling that we had and the flavor that we had in Sands of Time. So it's a bit of the mix. Gameplay-wise, we kept the new moves that we added in the Prince throughout the trilogy. We added new acrobatic moves like the dagger plant, the chain swings, the chain actions, these kind of things. We implemented a new combat system for the Sand Prince using the chain, and we implemented the speed kill system, meaning that one part of the game is still the same as it was, more for the acrobatic and puzzle side, but we added new aspects to the game in order to renew it. The game will come out in December on all platforms, PS2, Xbox, GameCube and PC.